Just for you, the listeners of Podcast Fandom, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial. Just go to audibletrial.com/podcastfandom. There are over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/podcastfandom for your free audiobook download. Hey guys, welcome to Podcast Fandom, the official podcast for ProjectFandom.com. I'm your host, Nina.
And I'm John.
And we are back to talk about Game of Thrones, Season 4, Episode 4, Oathkeeper. We are not joined by Megan because Megan's under the weather, or she's feeling under the weather. What is that? How does you feel under the weather, right? You're not under the weather.
I mean, I imagine you're under the weather too.
I guess. She's sick. Basically. So she's not with us today. We're recording a bit earlier than we normally record, so I apologize if you guys wanted to get feedback in and you're like, what the fuck? Because this podcast will be out earlier than it normally is as well. So sorry about that. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm trying to figure out the best way to approach some stuff that I don't think of spoilers. What I may end up doing is just asking you straight up, like, this is what I think this is going to imply. And you can say whether or not you think it's something I should save for the spoiler section. Just to remind everybody, I've read the books. John has not. So I do not spoil things that have yet to happen. If something happens in the show that is different than it is in the books and it seems to not have any like further ramifications, you know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, that's just the way they did it and it, it's okay to talk about it. I will do that, but I won't spoil, future stuff. And considering that this episode basically just flipped the books upside down, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But just a reminder, if you do want to talk about book spoiler stuff specifically on this podcast, you can send them to Nina@ProjectFandom.com, and I read them in the spoiler section of the podcast, which takes place after the outro music. So at the end of the podcast, you'll hear our theme music play again, and if you don't want to hear book stuff, you can turn the podcast off then. So there are two things before we jump into talking about the episode scene by scene. There are two things I wanted to address. Last week's episode had the rape scene, or that scene as everybody's now referring to it. We all know what they mean when they say it. And so by the time we recorded, I don't remember if we talked about this aspect of it and it got edited out, like I edited, or if we didn't know it yet. But I just want to clear up that one of the things that made, for me and a lot of people, the rape so disturbing is not that it happened, because not like we're okay with rape, but we've seen rape on this show before, and we'll probably see a lot more rape to come. It's a very graphic story. The books are very graphic. The problem that people had was that for most people, they did not see that scene, the sex in the sept next to his Joffrey's body, as rape when they read the books. According to George R.R. Martin, he did not write it as rape. And what was really, so whether or not you agree that the book scene was rape or not, I think everybody looked at the show and thought he just raped Cersei. What was really disturbing, though, not just because they changed stuff, because this episode we're about to discuss was full of changes from the books, and that's okay. That is, I'm not a book purist that I'm going to hate it because it's just simply because it's a change. But the problem I think people had was that when asked about it, the show's director of that episode, Alex Graves, and the actor who plays Jaime, Nikolai Coster-Waldau, they both kind of had those, it's rape but not really, is it rape, yes and no, like that type of thing, which is really disturbing, right? Just as a society,
Yeah.
to think that
Well,
there are people who would think, it's kind of rape, like what's kind of rape. So
well, honestly, but I feel the same way about George R. R. Martin saying the scene in the book is not rape. So,
okay,
yeah.
so the concern then is, I think that you kind of feel like the show is in the hands of people who just really missed the mark. And I think after watching this episode that they missed the mark. I believe when they say that what they saw that as was a, almost like a symptom of this really fucked up, dysfunctional relationship that these two characters have. That something
Yeah.
like this happens between them and it is rape, but neither will even really see it as rape. I think that that's what they were going for, and they didn't quite hit the mark clearly, because if you look at this episode, it's not even being treated as a rape.
Yeah, I feel like the way that Jamie comes across in this episode and the way the relationship with him and Cersei comes across in this episode, it feels as though they honestly did not intend that scene to be that way.
Right.
So that because now, I mean, he's gone back to being the lovable guy that you thought
Right.
he was before then.
And I
So
think what happened was, and I said this, I remember when I was watching the scene for the very first time, uh, last Sunday, I thought, wow, this is not how I remember it happening in the book. So I was just like, this is crazy. Like, why are they doing this? And then I remember specifically there were two things that she did in that scene that I was sitting there like doubting myself, when she actually like kisses him back and pulls him closer to her. Those two things, I think it said to me, what the fuck are they going for? Because if he's raping her, she would not do that. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was like, well, the
exactly.
typical, do you know what I'm saying? Like the typical, the way we, imagine rape happens. And then I thought, well, maybe they're going for the whole, which I'm sure, I know I've, uh, heard accounts from women who have been raped, where one of the kind of survival mechanisms is when it's happening and you realize this is happening and I can't stop him. That whole, don't stop fighting so that maybe he doesn't kill you. You know what I mean? That doesn't make it less rape. That doesn't mean that she wanted it. It just means that this is how some women react when this is happening. So I thought maybe that's what they're going for. But either way, I think the way I've come down on it is I just think it was a really ill-conceived scene
Yeah.
that was just, it just, they I don't think that I think they totally fucked up.
Yeah. And and moving forward, I think honestly, like the fact he did rape her, honestly, but the way if they play it as if it wasn't, I think it's going to be easy to forget it, honestly, because it's
Yeah.
going to be like it didn't happen because
Yeah.
they're going to treat it like it didn't
Well,
happen.
listen,
So
I've already said in my recap for this episode, I specifically said that because I truly believe this was a creative fuck up, that I'm like, that didn't happen. Like unless, and I was holding out judgment to see how the show treated it, because I thought, okay, maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they're like, okay, we want to change this to rape, because they know how the series ends. That's the other thing. They know more than we know. They know how the book series ends, and so maybe they've decided, and we'll touch on that as we talk about this episode, but I thought, well, maybe they decided that this needs to happen because they know how he ultimately ends up. Do you know what I'm saying? Like in the two books that are not even out yet. So I was just like reserving judgment. But if you're going to start off where like, holy, like it didn't even happen, then I truly believe, and then because of the, the statements that they've released so far, I truly believe that they were going for something and they just didn't get it. They fucked up. And secondly, finally, before we jump into the episode, I want to just say that, um, there are some serious differences from the books in this episode that we're about to discuss. And I have a group on Facebook for people who have read the books, so that we can talk about those things without, like, spoiling people. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I said the other day was, I do not know that this series is going to have a satisfactory ending. Um, and now, honestly, I feel differently. I feel like if what they're doing, it seems like they're doing, is what I think they're doing, and I will touch on that in the spoiler section. I'm so excited because, yeah, I'm excited. So, okay, so let's jump into it. This episode begins with Masandi teaching Grey Worm. It looks like she's teaching him not just how to speak English, but how to read it as well, which I would imagine if you're teaching somebody how to speak a language, teaching them how to read it and recognize it is important.
Yeah, I guess reading lessons are a big deal on this show because this is the second time we've had someone had to learn to read.
Well, I like the fact though that and this is just, and true in real life as well, about, what it means to be a slave, and how, in this country when black people were slaves, how important education was and how dangerous slave owners felt education would be, you know what I mean? And so that there were,
Yeah.
Black slaves that could read and write, but had to hide that they could, because, that made them dangerous. So I do like the fact that, in a sense, Davos is not a slave to Stannis, but he kind of sort of is. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was caught smuggling. Stannis cut off his fingers. He's very much learning how to read in secret. So, or at least he was. So it feels like this feels right to me, but so he's learning, and I guess I don't even know if we can call it English, because this is a totally different universe, so it feels weird calling it English, but that's what it is. And we learned some things from this scene. He's from the Summer Isles, which I think that they have, in my mind, done a good job of kind of letting you know, like, Summer Isles is where, like, most of the black people come from. Because Zoro's duck sauce is what they call him on the internet, was from the Summer Isles.
It's like District 12 or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. There is there are characters in the books that are described as brown skin, that I don't even know if they're going to be introduced on the show, but they were from the Summer Isles. So yeah, I was like, okay, this is basically, like, I don't know, like, continent of Africa, maybe, I don't know. So, but this is where all the black people are. And then we learned Missandei's story of how she was taken from her home when she was 5, and we learned that Grey Worm doesn't remember anything before being an Unsullied. Like, he was always an Unsullied, he says, and she says that's not true. That he could return home if he wanted to, and he says no, kill the Masters. That's all. He's all about killing the Masters now.
Yeah, and I got such a bad feeling for, like, Daenerys, because she's kind of his master, and if she starts, like, treating him like she is his master, which later in the episode, like a few minutes later, she does seem like she is getting a little bit more, I don't know, bad, for lack of a better word. I feel like he may turn against her because he'll see her as a master now.
I think the difference, though, is that she was really clear to tell them when she asked them to fight for her after she had them kill the slave masters at Astapor. And then again in her speech last week, is that she is very much a queen. She's very much a Khaleesi, and she is in charge, but they have the freedom to go if they want to. So I think that's the difference. It's kind of like being in the military. I don't think that the way she treats them in this episode is master to slave like. I think it's boss to, like, so everybody has a choice, and this is your job, and this is what your job is, to do what I tell you to do, but if you don't like it, you can go, and I'm not going to kill you for going. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's currently how she is, and I'm just saying, if she changes, which it looks like she may be on that path,
okay,
to becoming that kind of a person with the way that she treats the prisoners later, and I feel like she may get on his bad side.
Okay. So she does interrupt this scene, Daenerys, and she tells him it's time. And we see that Grey Worm and two other Unsullied, they are dressed as the slaves of Meereen, and they go through the sewers and they interrupt a meeting between the slaves where they're talking about Daenerys' arrival and what it means and should they join her. And some are down to do it, but others are like, yeah, we've been through this before and it never ends well. And, this may not be a good idea. And Grey Worm convinces them that one day of freedom is worth it. Like, even if they're only free for one day, it is worth it. And he supplies them with weapons, pointing out that the slaves of Meereen outnumber the masters 3 to 1.
Yeah, and this thing was awesome, I thought, because the way that the layout allowed Grey Worm and the other slaves, for Khaleesi to come in without them knowing they were there. It was just really cool the way they just walked in, and then Grey Worm was pretty awesome the way he just delivered
Yeah.
those lines.
Yeah. He was like, the one slave was like, who are you? And he's like, I'm the one they call Grey Worm. He's saying it, in Valyria, and he's like, um, this is what I know. And he's like, yeah, but you're Unsullied. You could fight before you could walk. We're just like regular old slaves. And that's when he gives them the weapons. I really like that. And this is,
It's like though. I mean, you can give someone who's weak a weapon, and that doesn't make them a soldier.
yeah, yeah. But I guess if it's 3 to 1, I think three non-soldiers with weapons,
Yeah,
the odds of them doing pretty well for every one master is pretty high. And speaking of differences from the books, all of this is different. So they are not. Missandei has a brother who's an Unsullied in the books, and then there was some speculation, at least on my part, I know that I wondered if that little kind of, eye connection they had in the first episode was them making it so that he would end up being her brother, but clearly that's not the case, so they're not going there. And this is
yeah.
not.
When she was teaching him to read, and there was a little bit of flirtation, I felt, and I was like, they can't be brother and sister.
Yeah, right. There was a part where he kind of
Well,
puts his.
well, I guess they can be
Yeah.
in this universe.
When he puts his hand on the table, like she moves it away. I mean, clearly not knowing, their upbringing and stuff. Clearly they're not related. So that's that theory shot. And then the whole thing in the sewers and how they take Meereen is not quite like this. So book readers will recognize that's like one of the first major differences of this episode. And in my notes I put they made a point to put a whole lot of white slaves in there finally because last season's finale, people were not having it. They were like, why are all the brown people, lifting this white, blonde, blue-eyed savior up on their shoulders, calling her mother? Like, enough already. Why is it all the brown people she's liberating? So I think that, and I know the internet was like a buzz with that after the finale last year. So it feels like they were like, yeah, we might want to put some more white folks in collars this season. So we see that it works. It seems like it's like early morning hours. There's a master walking through the alleyways of Meereen with two of his guards, and he notices "Kill the Masters" painted on the wall. He looks up at the Great Pyramid, and atop, it was hard to see when they first showed it, but atop of the Great Pyramid, there are these, the harpies, and it's the same, that they were the statues you saw on either side of the gates of Meereen last week. This you couldn't tell what was up there at first. We learned what it is later, but clearly whatever he saw he didn't like because he starts to like oh, it's time to go. And
Oh shit!
yeah, and like from every direction there are slaves coming and they're armed. And where did his guards go?
They got the fuck out. That's what happened.
Holy fuck, they were like, I was like, it's kind of like in, I know it happened in one Batman movie. I feel like I've seen it happen several places though. I don't know if it's just, but like he
Yeah,
kind of just drops.
you're the one bringing up Batman now.
Yes. Where he just kind of drops down from the sky, like hanging upside down, and snatches the person up, and they go up in the air, and the other person in the scene turns around, is like, where'd he go? Like, that's what it
That
felt
was
like.
that was a very prominent scene in Batman Begins.
Yeah, it feels like that's what happened. Like Batman just came and snatched these two guys up. But either way, they're gone. And the guards attack this slave master. Um, so there were people who had issues with the fact that "Kill the Masters" is written in English or whatever this language is that whatever they're calling English on this in this universe. I notice it like when I saw it in the previews for this episode last week at the end of last week's episode, so I knew it was coming and I didn't think anything of it. But then as the scene was playing out, particularly because it follows up this scene with Grey Worm speaking to them in another language and then before that learning to speak English, I did
Yeah.
think that that was kind of odd. And there are some people who were they take issue, not huge issue, maybe you call it nitpicky, but they took issue that that wasn't written in their language and then subtitled, as the master says it out loud, and then subtitle to say "Kill the Masters." Did that bother you at
I
all?
I mean, I kind of thought it might have been Grey Worm who wrote it. So I mean, he
Yeah,
just learned English like he was learning it.
yeah.
So
That actually did occur to me the second time I watched the episode. I thought, well, maybe he did it on his way out, like kind of as a continue, like motivation. Do you know what I mean? Like you
yeah, I
leave
mean
them there
because
with the weapons, and then you gotta just really like it does you no good if you leave them with weapons and you leave and then the momentum dies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you leave, and then there's like some guys in there who are like, I don't give a fuck what he gave us. We can't do this. Do you know what I
to go,
mean?
to go back to Batman, that's why you set the bridge on fire with a bat symbol because it sends a message to the people.
Yeah. So that's exactly
But
it. So it could be that Grey Room.
and then earlier, I mean, he did say "kill the masters." I mean, he said that, so I mean, it made sense for him to have written it too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So then we see Daenerys is being greeted by the newly freed people of Marine. They're chanting Misa. They're tossing their chains and collars on the ground. And they're gathering up all the slave masters who are, I appreciate the fact that they're always in that yellow and blue so you can tell them apart. Like, but they're all being gathered, and she asks Jorah to remind her how many slaves were crucified on their way, along the road to Marine. And he says 163 or 68. And she kind of nods at Grey Worm, and the Unsullied are ordered to gather up the slave masters. And Sir Barristan Selmy wants a quick word with her, and he says, sometimes it's best to answer injustice with mercy. And she says, I will answer injustice with justice. And we see that the slave masters are also now crucified the same way that they had done the slaves.
see, and that's what I was talking about. Like the way her character seems to be changing a little bit with the more power she gets, the more, I don't know, corrupt may be the wrong word, but she becomes more powerful, and she's like more accepting of her power, so she uses it.
Yeah. And then this part ends with her atop the pyramid, and she's looking out over the city, which is now hers, and we see that it's the Targaryen flag that is over the harpy at the top of the at the pyramid.
They claim they stake their claim.
Yep. Okay, so now we're with Bronn and Jaime. They're at their little practicing spot. And after Bronn kind of gets the best of Jaime by taking Jaime's golden hand and slapping him with it, they talk about Tyrion and whether or not he's innocent, which Bronn believes he is. And then Bronn gives Jaime a bit of a guilt trip. He's like, if you want to know how he's doing or if he did it, why don't you go ask him, yourself? You haven't visited him yet. And he brings up the fact that when he met Tyrion, they met because he stepped up to be Tyrion's champion during his trial at the Vale, and he only did it when Lysa insisted on having the trial, the fight that day, because originally Tyrion wanted Jaime, who was really far away, but he knew that his brother would come if he needed him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this and the way it leads into the scene with Jaime and Tyrion, because I was wondering if Bronn would continue to train Jaime because of what happened with Tyrion, and because that's how he started training Jaime was through Tyrion. Because
Hmm.
so I mean, I was wondering if that would be an issue, and it clearly wasn't.
Right.
So I like that, and then the way this leads into the next scene with Jaime and Tyrion was awesome.
I love the fact that he tells Jamie straight to his face that his nephew, well, really son, was a little twat.
Yeah, and everybody thought so.
Yes,
and
it is known. Joffrey was a twat.
and Jaime didn't say anything
No,
to object to that.
yeah, no, he knows. He knows his son was a bastard, a monster. So like you said, Jamie goes to see Tyrion, and they have this conversation in which Tyrion, Jamie confesses that Cersei wanted Jamie to kill him, and he asks, "Are you here to kill me?" And he goes, "Are you really asking?" And Jamie wants to know if Tyrion killed Joffrey, and he says, "Are you really asking me if I killed your son?" And he goes, "Are you really asking me if I'm here to kill my brother?" And
Yeah.
Tyrion refers to them as the Kingslayer brothers.
Sounds like a wrestling tag team.
Yeah. And then they talk about the trial, and Tyrion points out that it's pretty much going to be a joke. Because it doesn't matter. Like, a person could come and confess and have irrefutable evidence that they're the ones who did it, and they would still want his head on a spike. And Jamie says, "Well, you have to admit it doesn't look good considering your wife is missing," and she goes missing the same day Joffrey dies. And Tyrion points out that Sansa is not a killer, not yet.
Yes, I really love this scene because I mean, it's easy to forget actors are not related.
Hmm.
And so I love this scene and scenes like this where they feel like brothers here. They
Yeah.
feel very much like they're related and like they are Lannisters.
Hmm.
And like the whole thing where I wouldn't kill my nephew and I wouldn't kill my brother, and it's like you really it really drives home the fact that they do care about being Lannisters.
Yeah.
Even Tyrion, he's like, it's family. I care about my family. It feels. I mean, that may change later when they kill each other. I don't know, but it feels like in this scene that they really care about being Lannisters, and especially like Jaime still has that loyalty to his family, and it's getting closer and closer to the idea that Jaime only sees Tyrion as his only family now,
Yeah.
because Cersei and Tywin have kind of left him now, just
Um,
like they've left Tyrion.
I feel like I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, probably when we discussed episode 2, that I don't know that Tyrion would have killed Joffrey. I feel like if maybe Joffrey was like, if it was to like to defend himself, sure, but I don't think that he would have plotted to kill his nephew. He just wouldn't have done that, and I do think that they there is something there, and I mean, you really can't blame Tyrion. There is some sort of family loyalty and family pride, almost like what Roose Bolton does with Ramsay, where like you pointed out, he gets him to do things by dangling that carrot of you'll be my son, in front of his face, and I think we see it in season 1. Yeah, in season 1 with Tyrion, and even in 2, like Tywin's Tywin's thoughts on him are important to Tyrion. Do you know what I mean? Like how he feels about him. He knows his father hates him. He knows that he's, like he said in this scene, wished him dead on more than one occasion. But there's still that Lannister pride is still there. Do you know what I mean?
And even up into this season when he had the conversation with Oberyn, where they talked about being the second son and
Hmm.
being
Yeah.
like being disowned by your family. It's like he still feels that strongly about that because he keeps bringing it up.
Yeah.
And
Um.
I think it's like I had said that I thought Tyrion may have been the one who killed Joffrey, but then this scene really did prove to me that there's no way he would have done that,
Mhm.
because the way that this scene is constructed, it like I said, it feels like he wouldn't do that. He cares about family. Like
Yeah.
there's a reason why they always go around saying Lannisters always pay their debts, because they care about the fact that they are Lannisters.
Right. And it may not always be for the right reasons. Like when Catelyn had kidnapped Tyrion, And Tywin, he was like, when he says to Cersei at one point, when they kidnapped Tyrion, what did I do? Started a war to get him back. He's like, so what do you think I would do if they have Jaime? Whatever I can't. So sometimes it's just like a matter of the name. You know what I mean? Like, but
Yeah.
then whoever has the last name, yeah, it means something to them. Some more than others. Okay, so then the next scene is Baelish and Sansa on the ship. And he tells her that he's taking her back to the Vale because he's to marry Lysa Arryn. And she seems a little relieved by that, right? Because that is her aunt, it's family. Um, and then she asks him point blank why he would have killed Joffrey. She says, and when he talks about how one of the ways to kind of, remain hidden is to not let people know what your motivations are, like what it is you really,
Yeah.
really want.
He has another great line in this episode. Like he has several great lines in this episode actually, but one that I noted was he says, "A man with no motive is a man no one suspects," and I
Right.
was like, that makes so much sense. Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna kill somebody you don't care about
Right.
because nobody will think you did it.
Right. Or at the very least, you don't want them to know you have a motive. Like, you know what I mean? The fact that you
Yeah.
do it, he clearly had a motive, but the point is that you act like you don't have one and they would never look to him. Then you have people like Cersei, who's just so fucking stupid, who's going to have blinders on and only see Tyrion, that it kind of makes it easier for him to do it. And she says she doesn't buy it because they gave him Harrenhal. He's marrying, Lysa at the Vale. He has all these titles and properties. Why would he risk all of that to do something that would hurt them? And he talks about the fact that he has new friends. New friends who are not, the fact that Joffrey was such a monster made the Lannisters unpredictable, and he has new friends that really, really wanted Joffrey dead.
Yeah.
So they,
Before we leave this scene, I want to mention that I love the fact that it went directly from Tyrion saying that Sansa should never do that,
mhm,
should never kill Joffrey, that she's not a murderer, directly to Sansa saying the same thing about Tyrion. So it's like it goes directly from one of them to the other, saying
yeah,
the same thing about each other, and I love that because we have seen that she did keep her distance from him, but it's nice to see that she did see that he wouldn't do that.
right.
Like she did see that he is a good person on the most part.
And he brings up the fact that the necklace that she had played a role. That's where the poison was. And then as he talks about his new friends, it cuts to Olenna and Margaery walking through that damn garden again. Good Lord. And I love the fact she even says it because she's leaving. And Margie's like, I can't believe you're leaving me here with these people. And she's like, I don't want to be here for that trial. Like, that's tedious and boring. And she goes, almost as much as having to walk through these damn gardens again. Goodness, I mean, I know she's the Queen of Thorns, but why does she always have to be in the fucking garden? It's like, I just find it so weird. I mean, I guess it's an easy set for them to do. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of it is the way it's positioned because you get the impression that it's like on this like cliff, seaside cliff area. So it is a place where they could talk without being overheard for the most part, but still. But I love the fact that in the show they put a nod at the fact that she's always in these gardens.
Yeah, it feels like in character too, because I mean that's a nice place where you don't really get noticed really if you're
Right.
in the garden. Like you're always in the garden.
Yeah.
You're never out on the street or anything where people see you all the time. So
She talks about, she tells Margaery how she ended up marrying her husband Luther. She was supposed to marry a Targaryen, but she didn't want to. And so she purposely seduced the man who was supposed to propose to her sister. And she seduced him so well that he wanted her instead. And she tells Margaery that she needs to basically work Tommen while Cersei is distracted mourning over Joffrey. And then she confesses to murdering to being complicit in murdering Joffrey. She says, "You didn't think I was going to
Yes.
let you marry that monster, did you?"
Yes,
um,
I was right, and I
yeah,
think Megan was right too.
yeah.
So that's
I
great.
mean, if you go back and you watch it when she's touching Sansa's hair and she fondles the necklace, you can see her take the gem off the necklace.
Oh, really
Um,
look at you with your research.
huh?
Look at you with your research.
No, well, I mean, because I read the book, so I knew what had happened. Like, I knew, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So when I watched the episode and she goes up to Sansa and she's talking to her, I was like, oh, this is what we read about. Like, this is because in the book, though, it was a hairnet. And the hairnet had jewels, and the strangler poison is like a purple kind of hue to it or whatever, and they said that the hairnet had like 7 purple jewels in it. So in the book he gave her a hairnet, not a necklace. So when she came up to her and she was touching her hair, I thought, oh, she's palming the thing for the necklace. So it was noticeable if you've read the books. But I like the fact that if you didn't know, even before this episode, because that's what I was asking you guys, like I feel like if you watch the episode and you realize what happened to him, I think the natural thing to do would be to go back and start from the reception, you know what I mean, to the end and just like watch and pay attention. And I think they
Well,
did.
I don't watch things twice.
Oh, okay. I did not know that about you. But I'm just saying, from other podcasts that I've listened to and talking to people who follow our podcast, I know for a fact people went back and watched it, and some were able to pick up that she must have had something to do with it. And they did find the whole attention to Sansa's hair and necklace a little weird. So
Yeah.
anyway,
But
she does the
that was
same thing to Margaery
yeah.
in this scene. So if you had any doubt, you know what I mean? I love the fact that they threw that in there with it without it being so obvious. You know, like her saying specifically it was in the necklace and I took it. You know what I mean? I love the fact that just watching her, you know, touch Marjorie's hair and lift up the necklace would, you know, should call to mind that she did the same thing to Sansa.
Yeah. I mean, if I would have thought about it, I would have gone back and watched. I mean, I was joking about not watching things
Oh,
twice,
okay.
but I mean, I didn't. I don't usually watch things twice, so I didn't think about going back, and I didn't really want to because I wanted it to come to light,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
naturally. But if I would have gone back and looked, I imagine I still would have missed it. I wouldn't have been. I would have been looking at other things, I guess.
um, so now we're at the wall, and John is training some new recruits with, you know, how to fight the sword, and we see that one of the people in the crowd or the line of recruits is Locke. So he done made it up to the wall mighty damn fast. um,
Yeah.
and Alistair Thorne interrupts it, and he tells John, you know, you're not a ranger, you're a steward. Did you forget? You were like, you know, Mormont steward. You need to be cleaning out chamber pots. And we learn from this conversation that he has denied the request that they go beyond the wall to deal with the traitors. And Jenna Slint tells Alistair, you need to be careful because John is well liked and you're not. And you are acting Lord Commander, but there will be a vote because that's how they choose their Lord. Like all the men have to vote, and soon enough, Maester Aemon is gonna call for that vote, and you need to be careful because he's well liked, and you may find yourself answering to him. Perhaps you should let him go up to Craster's and let the traitors deal with him.
I love this because it shows even in like one of the worst places for you to be. There's politics, and there are
Hmm.
people who want to have the power. Like even if they're the king of the toilet,
Right,
basically.
right.
But basically, that's they want to be that.
Yeah.
So I like that.
So then Locke kind of cozies up to John, and you know, John straight up says he's Jon Snow. So now we know that Locke knows he's found the person he's there, you know, looking for, and he gives us some bullshit story about why he's at the wall. Then we go to Jaime and Cersei. She summoned him to her room, and she summoned him under the guise of wanting to know how safe Tommen is, like how many men are guarding Tommen. And it's just one. She brings up his vow to Catelyn to give her her daughters, and she asks, if I asked you, now that she's dead, if I asked you to go out there and bring me Sansa's head, would you do it? And Jaime's pretty much not about that life. Like he's just looking like, and she realizes it. Like the answer is no, he wouldn't do it. So she
He's,
also
he's basically like, sure, I would.
maybe yeah. She brings up the fact that she knows he went to see Tyrion. He tells her he doesn't believe Tyrion did it. and she's basically throws back in his face that, you've always had a soft spot for him, and and then she tells him, I want 4 men at Tommen's door, 4 members of the Night's Watch, excuse me, the King's Guard at Tommen's door at all times, and then she dismisses him. So
Yeah, it's
it's like the character of Cersei is, I feel like
insane.
she is, yeah, she is insane. And it's sad because in the books, she is, there is a part where I feel like there are definitely bad characters in the show that are likable, right? The people who have done bad things that you can still kind of like them and root for them. And you know what I mean?
Like
Like the
like
Hound.
Jaime, like
Like
the
Jamie.
Hound or
Yeah,
Jaime.
exactly. Um, and so, but with Cersei and Joffrey, like Joffrey was, usually that is so over the top that it almost doesn't work. You know what I mean? Because there was just like there was nothing in him that made you like him or could understand why he was the way he was. And certainly Tywin and Cersei played a hand in that. But then you look at Tommen and Myrcella and even Jaime and Tyrion, like they weren't like that, and they were also Lannisters. You know what I mean? But this kid was clearly raised with Cersei prominently in his ear to be a little fucking psychopath, to the point where she couldn't control him. But with Cersei, there was, I think, in the show, which was different from the books, where there were moments where she felt really human to me, and that some of the things that she did was basically being a product of this environment where women aren't valued. Do you know what I mean? There were a lot of times in the beginning where she would say things like, she says to Tyrion at one point, you've never taken this seriously. Neither has Jaime, and I have, and and I think in the books they play this up a lot, where she never understood, she didn't think it was fair that they were raised to be lords and expected to go on and do great things, and she was basically just expected to marry somebody. Do you know? And
Yeah,
like
it's
she
like
she wanted to be appreciated for her strategy. But I think the problem is she's just not very good at it. And I think that's what's the shame. I really feel like if they had made her this way, but make her smart, that I would like her more. Like, even though she is actively rooting for and plotting against, like rooting for the things that I don't want to happen to the characters that I like, and she's plotting against the characters that I like. So I wouldn't want to see her get away with stuff, but I would at least appreciate her as a strategist. Do you know what I mean? But she's so fucking insane that it's like, like, like she doesn't
I
even
think
think
yeah.
about the fact that if Tyrion didn't do it, if he didn't do it, if this all this reason that these people are giving you that says, listen, it doesn't make sense, Tyrion's not stupid, he wouldn't be standing there holding the cup, then you're actively letting the person who did kill your son get away with it.
Mhm. And I think that she has gotten crazier as the show has gone on,
Mm-hmm.
because she began like you said, she was kind of like this, just a woman in this environment,
Right.
Surviving,
Right.
and now that she, I think power did that to her. Honestly, a lot of the power that she got out of the fact that the Lannisters have been getting more power,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of made her, I don't know, let loose a little bit more.
Well,
I
I
don't
feel
know.
like, what
Yeah.
I think it is, though, is that you're right. Like, she had all of this power really unchecked, right? Because when Robert died and Joffrey became the king, it was just her there. And
Mhm.
Jaime was off, captured, and Tyrion was trying to travel back, and he stopped and met up with his dad, and his dad is the one that said, you need to go there and be my hand while I'm out here fighting Robb, and you need to bring that boy king and his mother to heal. So it wasn't until Tyrion got there, and you saw like the whole second season was Tyrion basically trying to undo, like figure out what the damage is that Cersei did, and then undo it, right? Like get the
Yeah.
people that were loyal to her, like Janos Flint and Pycelle, get them out of the way. And I feel like maybe if she had been treated seriously and allowed to have a seat at the table, maybe she wouldn't have been such a bad leader. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
she clearly saw the problem with cutting off Ned Stark's head. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was, even when Joffrey like said to do it, she was like, no, 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 wait, 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 no, because she understood. You know, I feel like if she had been allowed to be a leader a little bit and be heard, maybe she wouldn't have gotten the power and then totally fucked it up. Like, just doing things just to do it, as opposed to doing them because it's the smart and the right play, you know?
And I feel like we did get that a few scenes, especially the one that comes to mind is the one with Sansa, or Sansa. Is it? I forget. Sansa. And I never remember. But during the attack, when she was talking with Sansa in the when the women were hiding, Blackwater. Like, and when in that scene, she was kind of leading Sansa, and I felt like that felt like her being powerful in a role that she is comfortable with and she has had for a long time.
There's another scene where she's actually telling Sansa, after Sansa gets her period and the Hound finds out and tells Cersei, and they're having that talk, and she tells her basically, like, Joffrey's always been difficult, you know, but you're going to give him little princes and princesses and you're going to love them. And she tells her basically, don't love anybody but your children. And she goes, shouldn't I love the king? And she goes, you can try. Like, you know, like, I really felt like there are these moments of brilliance to Cersei where she's just like, listen, have his babies, love your babies, and make the best of this shit. I know my son's a little terror. You know, she has these moments, but I also think she's been drinking a lot. Like, when's the last time we've seen Cersei without a drink in her hand? I feel like ever since, like, the end of, like, from the Blackwater episode where she was getting drunk and talking about a bit of rape as opposed to, you know, a whole lot of rape, I feel like she had just totally turned into this drunk. So I don't think that helps either. You know what I mean?
I think, like, that's, like, the stuff where she was, like, telling Sansa how to be her, basically, because she has that experience. I feel like that she was sane in those moments. Like, that's when she was sane, is when she was giving those instructions to Sansa.
Yeah. Okay, so then we're speaking of Tommen. Margaery tippy toes into his room at night. It's dark. She has a one lit candle. She sits it on the table. She sits on the bed. And what I have in my notes is she basically puts down a different type of seduction. In the scene with her and Lady Olenna, when Lady Olenna talks about how she conveniently got lost and found her way to, you know, her sister's fiance's bedroom. And she goes, the next morning he could not walk. And when he could, all he wanted was what I had given him the night before, you know. So
and hearing that old lady talk like that was awkward.
Oh, I loved it.
I liked it because you don't think about the fact that old people used to have sex, and they probably do. But it's still weird to hear that because like, we know that she's conniving and like she's smart and like she can be you know sneaky and stuff like that, but she does look like a sweet old lady.
Yeah.
So just to think about her like just leaving a man bow-legged or whatever. I was like, knock Jesus this back Christ.
Out. But so when she said to her, "I was very, very good, but you're better." There are people who actually think. I think as a writer, I think when she said, you know, he couldn't walk the next day and all he wanted was what I gave him the night before. And then she pauses and she goes, I was very, very good. I think you are meant to think, because of what it followed, you know, followed, that she was saying she was good in bed. But I think more than that, I think what she was implying was, I was a really good seductress manipulator. Because so then the next line is, but you're better. Clearly she's not talking about sex, right? Like, clearly she's not saying you fuck better than I do, young granddaughter. So people were freaked out about that, and I'm like, that's not what she meant.
I don't think, it doesn't really make sense for her. Because why would she know that?
Right, exactly. I couldn't believe people were saying how gross and yucky that was, and I'm like, that's not what she meant, people.
But
play it a little bit smarter. But
I can understand though why people would.
Oh, it was
It,
clearly designed to make you think that that's what she was saying.
and because then we do get the scene where she's in Tommen's bedroom and he's basically clutching a teddy bear. He's so young,
Right.
and I'm
But see,
like, that you're supposed to be creeped out about this.
but that's my point though. That's the thing.
I know, yeah.
I don't think that seduction to me was clearly based on the fact that she's a beautiful young woman and he's a boy at that age where, his hormones are all over the place, right? So that's clearly why it worked. But if you listen to what she was doing, how she was seducing him, it was so much more and better than sexual. And then I was like, this is the Margaery that I wanted to see. Like I said, when I read the books, I felt like I could not really get a bead on her. And I could not understand. She has to know being married to Joffrey would just be the fucking worst. And you really got to want to be queen to put up with that shit. But it kind of reminded me of the scene with her, with Joffrey with the crossbow. Like, she knows what buttons to push. And with Joffrey, who did not really seem to be interested in sex, she didn't have to really go there with him. It was all about making him feel like a man, playing up his importance, playing like you were into the things that he was into. But with Tommen, it was like, oh, you need a friend. And Sir Pounce is so cute. And we should just have a secret. Because boys at that age, do you know what I mean? So I don't doubt for a minute that he was like a little baby boner under those blankets. But I feel like for
I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah. But I feel like for her, though, the seduction was in the mind almost. You know what I mean? Like the friendship. Yeah.
I didn't get anything sexual out of her. Honestly, I didn't get anything sexual out of what she was doing, because especially when she ends it and she kisses him on his forehead.
Yeah.
That really sealed it. If it wasn't clear up to that point, I think that really made it very clear that she wasn't seducing him sexually.
Right.
She was seducing him
as a
emotionally.
Friend. Yes, yeah. She's making him an ally before Cersei even gets a chance to make her an enemy, which is just lovely, and I'm here for it, and I can't wait to see how this plays out. So that's what she does. She talks about his cat, and he says how Joffrey was always threatening to kill it and mix his innards up in Tommen's food, so he wouldn't even know he was eating his cat. I was like, oh my god, that kid was the fucking worst.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she basically seduces Tommen in that way, and she points out that it needs to be a secret. So I love that scene so much. And just a point of note that the kid playing Tommen, we all know that they aged him up from season 2, but he was one of the Lannister boys that Robb had captured and the Karstarks murdered. Which, set off the whole thing with people turning against Robb and all that. But because he ended up having them all hanged because of it. So he played one of those Lannister boys. So, but yeah, and I think this kid's he's a good actor. Like we talked about in another podcast, like how a lot of times kid actors aren't that good. The little bit I've seen of him, he seems like, I don't feel like I never watch him and feel like he's acting. Do you know what I mean? So then Jaime and Brienne, he is clearly, they're looking at the Book of Brothers, and she's noting that he doesn't have much written on his page, and what is there isn't very favorable, after becoming a member of the Knights Guard at the age of 16. Everything else kind of went downhill from there for him, and he's known as a Kingslayer. And he gives her the Valyrian sword his father gave him, and he charges her with going out there and finding Sansa and making sure she's safe. Arya too, but he's like, she's probably dead. But if you find her, great. But really, we know Sansa's out there. And then he gives her this really cool armor, and he gives her Podrick as a squire.
Yeah, I love the fact that he gave her the sword, because that's really symbolic of him, at least in my mind, of him letting go of his family, because when Tywin gave him that sword, he was like, "You've always wanted one of these in the family," because he was still a part of that, wanting to make the Lannisters great. Mm-hmm. And now he's like, "Here, you can have this sword because I don't want it anymore."
Yeah,
it's like that feels like to me he's giving away at least his ties to the Lannister, legacy.
Yeah. This scene also confirms something that I had said. I know there were some people who had some question about when Tywin said to Jaime in the first episode that the sword, he's like, where'd you get this much Valyrian steel? And he said, from someone who had no further use of it, that Jaime knew he was talking about Ned Stark's sword. And I thought the scene played that, and I still maintain the way that he played it, it didn't seem like Jaime got who he was like, you know what I mean? That he was like, he made the connection that it was Ned's sword. But clearly he does know that it was Ned's sword because he tells her that. And I do think that there's some, beauty in her using this girl's father's sword, you know what I mean, to go out there and fight for her and protect her and find her. So, and then Bronn gives Podrick Tyrion's axe that he used at Blackwater. And before Brienne can go off with Podrick, she names the sword Oathkeeper. And she says goodbye to Jaime, and it is clear that they don't expect to see each other ever again. This goodbye.
I just want to say, Oathkeeper is not an inherently less stupid name than the other sword names we've heard, but it does sound much better knowing that Joffrey wasn't the one who came up with it.
Yes. Oh, he was so bad at naming swords. Okay, so now we're back up at the wall, and can I just say, fucking Brienne and that armor, I think I said on Twitter, I was like, he got her out there looking like new money. She looks so fucking good. She looks so formidable. Like, if I saw her normally, right, like, even if she wasn't in that armor, right, pre-Brienne, she still looked like a badass. But now, with, like, her hair all slicked back and clean, and she had that, I was like, oh, she looks so formidable.
Yeah, she got a bath, and she's got new shiny armor.
Yeah, yeah. She kind of reminded me of the Mountain. The first time we saw the Mountain at that tournament in the beginning, when Ned they did that tournament to celebrate him being the Hand or whatever. In season 1, he had on like that dark armor like that, and her side, I don't know. She just kind of reminded me of a female, the Mountain.
Yeah, and I love the teaming of her and Podrick. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see them like just out like the Hound and Arya like that kind of. I hope we see them out there.
Well, I meant to bring up like differences along the way, and so one of the differences, the whole lock thing, going up to the wall to try to find Bran and Rickon and to possibly kill Jon, as Ramsay pointed out, we don't need any Starks alive. That's different. And the way that Podrick meets Brienne, or how they team up, is different. So in the books, he does give her the sword and charge her with this, but there's like she's been out for a while, and like from her point of view chapter, we know that she feels like somebody's been following her, and it turns out to be Podrick. So he just follows her on his own in the books. Oh. So I like this a lot better, because this is another thing that I feel like they are amping up the pace. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think this is great. Like, we just saved so much bullshit about having him tail her for like 2 episodes or some bullshit. You know what I mean?
And I hope they run into Arya and the Hound, because that would be so cool.
Let me ask you, because that already passed. So we know that the Hound is supposedly taking Arya to the Vale, right? Like, that's what he's trying to do. And we know that Littlefinger is taking Sansa to the Vale. Do you think that they're going to reunite there?
Probably.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. He's like, I don't know. It's fucking Game of Thrones. They'll probably both die next week. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, you never know. Like, things can change on a dime.
It feels like
but currently it does feel like they're on that path.
Yeah, I mean, they've done some things where, like, they did it with last season with this might even have been the same episode, the Red Wedding episode, where Arya was right outside, the Frey's place, and was this close to seeing her family, and no, it didn't work out. And then Jon was down fighting with the wildlings with Bran and them up in the tower. Like, they always come so close to reuniting, and then it's like, nope. So I don't know. And it seems like we may get that next week too. Like, will Jon get there in time? Okay, so Sam and Jon, speaking of Jon, they're at the wall and at Castle Black. Sam is worried about Gilly. He's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have left her at Molestown. I'm like, no, really? You fucking think? You think you shouldn't have left her at a fucking whorehouse when you know there are wildlings out there ransacking fucking North cities, little villages? Oh, I fucking hate Sam sometimes. I do. I know it's awful
But
because he's a
but
good
yeah,
guy, but sometimes he's too fucking good and he doesn't think.
yeah, because I mean he did it for a good reason, but now he's realizing maybe the good reason wasn't enough
Well, I feel like
to
it,
do that.
well, I forgot to mention this when I was listening to last week's podcast. I forgot to mention this, but I really like the fact when she told him, when he said, it's what's best, and she goes, for you. And I thought, yeah, because his thing is, I think the men here might rape you. I don't think I can protect you because he is still a craven. He's still a coward, okay? And then it doesn't help his case that they don't believe that he killed that White Walker. Remember, he was like, they don't believe me. And she was like, I will never forget the way that thing screamed. You did it. And he brings up, well, listen, I can't, one stabbing one White Walker in the back with dragon glass is one thing, and running away from Crasters is one thing. But I can't fight all these guys if they decide, yeah, you know what, we're going to go give that girl a bit of rape. I'm sorry, the way Cersei said bit of rape is like, I have to say it that way, at least when discussing Game of Thrones. But anyway, so I got his point. He's like, but it really did feel like this was more for him. Like for him to feel like, okay, I did something, and if something happens to her, I don't have to be here to fail. You know what I mean? And trying to
Yeah,
stop it. Like it felt like kind
like
of like out
yeah.
of sight, out of mind. So it did feel really selfish. And I feel like he was purposely not seeing how awful that situation was when he left her because it
And
was easy for him.
part of me though, I feel like he wasn't like we mentioned last week that he was not wanting to say that he had feelings for her.
Hmm.
And I feel like part of it is that he thought it was better for him because she would be over there, and if something happened to her, it wouldn't be his fault.
Right.
But now that she's away from him, he misses her, and he's still fearful of her safety.
Right.
So it's like he's I think he's recognizing that he does have feelings for her. So that I think that plays into it too.
And then just for me, as having read the books, that I feel like the whole Sam Gilly thing was one of the most least interesting things in the books, and they're only slightly more interesting because they're surrounded by the awesomeness of the other stuff going on. So, but he's worried about her, and John is basically like, "Well, shit, ain't shit we can do now. Like, you should have thought about that shit before you took her."
I love him. He's so cool.
Yeah. So, and then we learned that Sam told John about Bran going beyond the wall. It's like, damn it, Sam, you had one fucking job.
Yeah, we had two jobs: send the ravens and don't say that.
Yeah, like Jesus. But and this is different because in the books he doesn't do this. Like he doesn't tell. But now seeing where they're going with this, it makes sense. But that was like, so when that happened, I was looking around like, what the fuck am I watching? They're just basically like reading the books and saying, okay, let's do the exact opposite. That everything that happens in this part of
But
the book.
I do feel like though because they do know how it ends, like their changes
Right.
will probably make sense in
Yeah.
the
Oh,
long
yeah.
run.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like, I remember talking about that in the spoiler section. It's clear now that I know that they know how it ends. Again, when the rape happened, I thought, well, shit, maybe this plays into some shit that I'm gonna read when this other book comes out, whenever the fuck it's gonna come out. You know?
2024.
Right? Shit, the show will be over. Fuck you, George R. R. Martin. But anyway, so then they're talking about the fact that Bran is probably at Craster's. And I love that John is like, how far do you think he could have traveled? You know, like, I really expected them to say, like, if they travel this many hours a day, covering this many miles on Hodor's back, times this, and
And the
giving into
train
account that the fact that there's snow on the ground, which will slow you down by approximately.
and a train leaves Chicago and going at 80 miles per hour.
I just love the fact that they were like, they had the map out. I was like, oh shit, we're about to get into some algebra here. But basically, they come to the conclusion that the fact that we know that Mance Rayder has been recruiting like everybody north of the wall to join his cause, that there are a lot of abandoned villages and stuff. So they will probably come across Crasters. Locke interrupts this conversation. It's not clear how much he heard, but I think he heard enough. So, and then that would make sense. Like also that he would want to go out and do this because he knows that Bran is out there. he has a chance to get John away, from a lot of the Night's Watch and possibly, do whatever he wants to do to him. But if it makes more sense that he would volunteer to go, knowing that Bran's on the other side of the wall. And of course, he wouldn't know that unless John knows that. And the only way John would know that is if Sam opened his big fucking mouth, which apparently he did off screen. So Locke interrupts and says that Alistair wants to see him. Alistair tells John that he can go. He changed his mind. He can go up to Craster's to deal with the traitors, but he's not going to make any men go with him. Anyone who goes has to volunteer. So John gives this big speech about what those guys did and how they betrayed Lord Commander Mormont, and he asks for volunteers. And at first you think no one's going to go. Like, this is a trope that is done to death. It's like the slow clap, right? Like
it's like the scene with Catelyn in the wherever it was that they met, and people had to stand up.
Yeah, that was a little better though, because she was calling them out one by one, and it was before you knew what she was going to do. So she's like, "Say, oh, you remember how close you were with my family, and you over there, remember my dad used to do so and so for you." And then she presented what she wanted them to do.
This scene was this felt more like Dead Poet Society.
Yes,
my captain.
Yes. So slowly but surely,
Ethan Hawke is standing on the desk.
So slowly but surely, some guys stand up, and including Locke, who is still, hasn't taken his vows yet. He's still in the recruit training part, which John points out, but he says, I know how to fight, and then let me say my vows, because it sounds like you're going to need people who know how to fight. And Alistair is sitting there looking super butthurt, because he didn't, even though Janice fucking told you this guy is well liked. Like, I really think that he thought he wasn't going to get anybody to go with him.
Yeah.
Like, which is so fucking, that just shows how stupid he is, that, that he would not realize how well liked John is.
Yeah, that's his arrogance, really.
Yeah, and not only that, but how respected Lord Commander Mormont was, really, because that is what John played on to get, whether it was the truth, but that's definitely what he played on. Do you think that Alistair Thorne knows what Locke is up to?
Because, I haven't even thought about that.
Because John had to look to, when Locke was like, well, let me take my vows, John had to turn around and look to Alistair to get permission, because he's acting Lord Commander, for him to be able to, say his vows to go. And he nodded like, okay. And I was really waiting for the scene to end on some Alistair Locke eye contact, you know what I mean? So we could piece it together like, oh, of course he's going to let him go. This is why he changed his mind. But I don't think so. I really feel like this is Janice's suggestion. He's listening to Janice's suggestion where he's hoping he goes out there and he doesn't come back. And then it's just a moment. This is just, a opportunity for Locke, but they're unclear.
Yeah, and if Alistair had said no, it might have given John some kind of idea of that Alistair was trying to send him into at his death
without having somebody who's there who knows how to fight, and proved it earlier in the episode. So okay, so now we're at Craster's, and there's not a bit of rape, there's a whole bunch of rape going on at Craster's, and we see
immediately when this was I felt like this, because I know there's been a lot of complaints about how much sexual assault was in this scene, and I think immediately when this scene started, I got the feeling like I wanted Jon Snow to show up here and kill these guys because of what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like the scene was for.
Okay, well let's talk about because one of our friends, Willette, had posted on Facebook that she's considering giving up on the show because she felt like this was gratuitous.
Really?
Oh yeah, and there was like somebody who commented saying that they felt like this didn't add anything to the plot. In fact, that it detracted from it, and it was so far off the books. And here's the thing. I don't agree with that at all. And I was trying to figure out a way to comment on her thread and say it without it sounding as dismissive as I'm sure it's going to sound. But please know my intentions is not to be that way. I really don't know how to say it other than, okay, if you haven't read the books, that's one thing. But I think after 4 seasons, right? We're approaching 4.5 seasons at this point. Next week will be the halfway point. You got to know what kind of show you're watching, right? Having read the books, I can't imagine that anybody has read the books and is watching this show, particularly the scenes at Craster's last night, and thinking, oh, this is a bridge too far. Because clearly I'm like, what the hell have you been watching? I think the point was, and the example I use is in the first season, the scene with Littlefinger, and when Roz first arrives at his whorehouse, and he's training her how to have sex with the other girl, like, and they're yelling and screaming, and he's like, you sound like fools, and he kind of talks them through how to do it, but he's also talking about like himself and where he's come from. The point of that scene was to know what kind of man Littlefinger was, right? So you could say there was really no reason to have these two women having sex, graphically while this is going on. But I feel like the fact that those women were having sex as graphically as they were with him talking, and it clearly did not affect him. Like this, he runs a whorehouse, but he has shown no interest in whores. The fact that this is the type of, I think that also shows you what kind of man he is. So I think in this, is it comfortable to see rape? No, it's not supposed to be comfortable, but that's supposed to show you this isn't just these guys sitting around and randomly grabbing girls and taking them to private quarters and raping them. They are doing it out in the open while people are eating and drinking and sleeping and just being, like it's horrible. And I don't feel like that was gratuitous. I think that was the point. They were showing you John needs to get up there. Like this is not good what's going on. And if you would ever thought you would say those girls were better off with their father husband, like, clearly they were better off with their father husband than this shit that was going on, Like it was awful.
Yeah, and that immediately, that's like I said, that's exactly how I felt, was that because we went straight from Jon Snow saying he was doing here to here and them being this way, and I felt like it was very clear to me that they're bad guys. Like you're supposed to see them being so horrible that you want him to get there and kill them all. That's what you want to happen.
And I don't think the fact of the matter is, I don't think, well, I can't say for everybody. I don't think it would have been as effective as if he's sitting there. So his name is Carl Tanner, which has got to be the most normal name in this show ever. Like I was like, are you serious? That's his name? Because I had to go double check. I was like writing my notes. I thought he said his name was Carl Tanner before he takes a drink. So he is drinking wine out of Mormont's skull. Okay. There are women being raped in front of him, behind him. He is, he's telling this one guy whose name I know, I think it's Raster, but that's so close to Craster's. Okay.
It's Rast.
Rast. Okay. He tells him.
And that I just want to say that guy looks like a mixture between me and Robert Baratheon.
He really does. God, he does. I'm glad you said it. Yeah. He does look like he totally does. He looks like he could be one of Baratheon's bastards. Honestly, somebody needs to go check his papers. So,
that makes me think I'm a Baratheon.
Right, so the red woman might want to get a hold of some of his blood. But, so all this is going on, and he tells Rast to go feed the beast. So at first, I was like, I really hope that's not some nasty euphemism. But at first, I thought, do they have a White Walker chained up? Because when he said go feed the beast, and he tossed him, that was like pig parts, right? That wasn't people parts, was it?
Honestly, I assumed it was people, but I guess it could have.
I assumed it was people, but now, when I saw it, I thought it was people, and then I thought White Walker. Because I was like, what could they be feeding, quelling a beast, and feeding human flesh to? But now that I know that it was Ghost, I'm like, maybe it was pig then, because that was a big part of them, wanting to be there, is that Craster had all these pigs and all this food and stuff. So, okay. So anyway, he's basically the worst. He tells him to go feed this beast. One of Craster's daughter wives comes in, and she says this baby is the last of Craster's children, and it's a boy. He's going to kill it, one less mouth to feed. And she tells him, and the other girls start chanting that the baby, what Craster did was he presented it to the gods. It was a gift for the gods. So he's like, all right, fine. You go do it, Rast, because you're going out anyway.
Yeah, you're going that way.
Yeah. So he goes outside with the baby, Rast, and he leaves it in the woods, like we saw happen in the second season. And he covers the baby's face with a little blanket before he leaves, and I couldn't tell if that was like the little bit of him that's human, like was like, oh baby, you're going to be cold, or the little bit of him that's human that kind of felt like if I don't have to see the baby's face as I'm leaving. I don't know, I couldn't understand why he did that. But he leaves the baby, he goes off. We see that the beast is Ghost. They have Ghost in a cage outside, and he's supposed to feed it and give it water, but he pours the water out in the snow. And Ghost is like, fuck you and everything you stand for. Like, seriously? I feel like those direwolves are so smart. Like, I really felt like he was like, oh, when I get out of here, I'm going to fuck you up.
He was staring at that water on the ground as he was pouring it. He was like, "Whoa, what are you
I
doing? I was
know.
going to drink that."
He was like, oh, your ass is mine. Um, and he actually, like, charges at the gate, right at the door, and like growls, and Rast goes falling back. And then the wind picks up and the birds start, and the water freezes over, and it's like, well, a White Walker's coming. So he runs and he hauls ass. Meanwhile, we see Bran and Hodor and the rest are camping nearby because it's so close that they can actually hear the baby. And Bran decides to warg into Summer to go investigate. He sees Ghost, and then he falls, and we can't tell exactly what happened to him, but it knocks Bran out of him, and Bran realizes that Summer has been caught in a trap and that Ghost is out there in a cage.
God, this is like Bran going making those stark decisions that gets everybody into some deep shit.
I know. So, because at first he was like, I'm going to go. And she was like, we can't go. He goes, I'm going. And I'm like, how are you going? Like, I totally wasn't thinking warging. I was just like, where do you think you going?
He started to stand up, but he's just leaning up. And then he does warg, and the other guy, I forget the kid's name, but he looks
Jojen.
at him like, yeah, and he rolls his eyes like, oh, here we go again.
I know. Jesus. So they go to, when he tells them that, they go to investigate, and they see the men outside of Craster's, and they realize they're Night's Watch, but they see the way they're treating the women and stuff, and she's like, well, if they were Night's Watch, they're no longer Night's Watch. And she's like, we gotta go, but Bran won't leave his direwolf. So she's like, fine, tell me where you think he is or whatever, and if I'm not back. And she starts to go off, and she's knocked out, and they're surrounded by the traitors from the
I
Night's
love
Watch.
I love that because she's like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna go over it. Wham, right in the
Yeah,
face.
yes. So then they have Hodor tied up outside. This was so awful. And they're taunting him, and Rast stabs Hodor in the leg. And all
Yeah,
he
that
says is Hodor, Hodor. After he gets stabbed, that Hodor is so pathetic and sad. It's like, Hodor, like,
that
why'd you
actor,
do that?
I forget his name, but the actor does so much with one word.
He really
Like, because
does.
he's like he's so happy sometimes, and then he's so scared, and
Yeah.
then he's sad. He's really good.
When you, it's like when you see people that act, like practicing to act like a line, and it's like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Like, they keep changing the emphasis on different things. It's like that. It's like he can put so much emphasis, different emphasis on that one word, and it makes, like, you totally, like, go back and watch after he gets stabbed. It'll make you cry how the way he says Hodor. So, inside they have the Reeds, Mira and Jojen, and they have Bran. And Tanner Carl wants to know who they are and what they're doing there. And then Jojen has a seizure, and Carl won't let Mira help him. He puts a knife to her neck. I almost had a gun to her head, and he wants to know who they are. And Bran is like, I really thought he was going to warg into Ghost and get out, or warg into somebody and like maybe warg into Carl and make him stab himself. And I was like, why won't he do that? But I just think it took a lot out of him when he did it to Summer, because he's like, you notice that, right? Like, he's kind of like wobbling, and like, he looks really
Like,
drowsy.
and then he can't get himself up. Carl has to have somebody else help him sit up too, because
Yeah.
he's laying on the floor and he can't get up. So
So
so he's like, get him up because
yeah.
it's weird.
He doesn't, he just basically confesses who he is. He says he's Brandon Stark of Winterfell. And Carl is basically like, oh, I thought today was going to be boring, so this can't be good. And then it cuts to the end of the episode, which is the White Walker he takes the baby, he's carrying the baby on his zombie horse. He takes it to the Fortress of Solitude, places it places it on this ice table and leaves. And then we see this like line of figures in black, like at like a distance away, and it's all kind of like blurry. And I like that when the baby was in the White Walker's arms on the horse, we see from the baby's point of view, the White Walker like look down at it. And I love it's like, when babies are first born, they say like they can only see, but like, things are still blurry. They can only see like a certain number of like, inches and then feet in front of them. So I like that all of his like peripheral vision was like all like cloudy, you know what I mean? And like hazy. But so we kind of, it almost looks like that, but we could see like this person walking towards him. And at first I thought it was a Targaryen. Because, and I know that sounds crazy, but all you saw was the white,
yeah.
The hair, like, so, and then it was all in black.
I'll tell you who I thought it was going to be Tywin, honestly, because his shape, it just looked like, I was like, maybe that's Tywin, who is that?
Yeah, and I know, really, because and maybe because it's fresh in my mind, because I just watched the first season over the past couple of days, but, like, there is Viserys, the clothes that he wore, Jorah kind of has it too, where it almost is like a long leather skirt over the pants. Do you know what I mean? So I really thought that it was someone we would know, like a human, but it's not. It is a White Walker with like, but he has like these horns on top of it, almost like the spikes of a crown. And he picks the baby up and he puts his coke nail on the baby's face, and the baby's fussing and crying and stuff. And then the baby settles for a second, and as he's touching the baby's cheek with that nail, the baby's eyes ice over and turn into that icy. I called it White Walker blue, which needs to be a Crayola color. Somebody needs to get on that, like a Game of Thrones inspired box of crayons,
or like nail polish or something.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so it's like that. The baby's eyes turn that blue, and then that's how the episode ends.
Yeah, so I like this first. Well, first off, I want to say, because I'll just go back to the scene with Brienne. I think the fact that Brienne is there now makes you want Jon Snow to get there so much more.
Oh yeah.
And then this whole thing with the baby was creepy as hell, because honestly it creeped me out, because the baby's crying so much, and then it's all white, and then you have these big lanky White Walkers, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I thought that he's going to become a White Walker, because the baby's not dead yet. So I figure that has to be what it is, because he's not killing the baby, because he didn't kill the baby and eat it.
Right,
so he's treating it not badly.
Right.
So I mean,
he
has to be taking it somewhere, and they're going to make him, and that's how they get more White Walkers. I don't.
Well, the thing is, okay, so there's a couple of things. One, in the books, this has not happened in the books. Like, we were watching this. Yeah, I'm sure you probably got that from the freakouts last night. And when I say freak out, I'm freaking out in a good way. I don't give a fuck if this spoils me for the books. Bring it, because, and I will get into the details of why I feel this way. But I have been really concerned with this season going forward, because my personal opinion is, in the books, some shit drags on too long. I feel like, there's still a couple of nice twisty things coming up that I think that they'll hit this season. But after that, I just don't feel like there's a lot of like, I've been really fucking concerned. So I love this, because to me, this does something to the show, which I think it's going to desperately need once we get past this season, because like I said, the stuff going on in the books is just a lot of, I don't think people who haven't read the books, they understand just how far apart these characters are and sometimes remain. And it's just so big and sweeping. And I feel for TV, it's different. Like, I feel like when you watch TV, you want to see reunions every now and again. You want to see the good guys win a couple of times, So I love this. I am not a book purist in the sense that I am like, I can't believe you spoiled me.
I think that, we've mentioned this, without getting spoilery for another show, we've mentioned this kind of thing when we've done The Walking Dead, where perhaps because those are comic books, the show has to expand them and change them even more. And like we've talked about, Game of Thrones really hasn't deviated until much until this season.
Yeah.
So I think eventually you kind of do need to do that. And I think this is a good move because it's nice to level the playing field sometimes with all of your viewers.
Yeah.
So that, like, some things, nobody knows what's coming. Like, because up to this point, like, the book readers, like, which I'm not one, they know basically everything that's coming.
Right.
So I think it's a good idea to have some things that happen that they don't even see coming.
Right.
Because, like you said, it even it drags out in the books. But I think that the show can start to drag out if you always know what's coming.
Right. And I will say that, how do you feel about this whole... It does feel like two separate shows at times. Again, having watched the first season the other day, I remember we watched Game of Thrones because we didn't have HBO. And I only got HBO in the summer to watch True Blood. And yeah, I need my ass kicked to pay for HBO for True Blood.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people now who only get HBO for Game of Thrones. I think that's a little bit more understandable, but don't judge me. But everybody was talking about the show, and I was just like, yeah, whatever. We're going to get HBO in a few weeks when True Blood starts. And then I just got sick of everybody talking about it and saying how good it was. And our friend Kat was just, saying how she'd read the books and it was so good. So we got HBO a week earlier than we would have, and we marathoned all the first 9 episodes before the finale. So we watched the finale live with everyone else. And I remember not knowing anything what the show was about. I know shit about dragons. I know nothing about White Walkers. So when I watched the first opening scene with like the White Walkers and the zombified little girl with the blue eyes, I was just like, holy shit. And then we didn't see any of that shit, like up until like the episode where they brought the bodies back. Remember at Castle Black and they reanimated and all that. So it feels like they had been, and then at the end with the dragons. But even still, it feels like they've been peppering it in a little. And sometimes it's a bit jarring when you watch the whole episode take place like in King's Landing, and you think about Cersei drinking her wine, and this is in that same universe. There's shit like this going on behind the wall. It's like, it's so weird, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's kind of nice. It's almost like if you were watching, like, I don't know, like say you're watching, NYPD Blue, and then they cut to a scene and it's Star Trek. Do you know what I mean? It's like, wait, what?
Honestly, that would be awesome.
Right?
NYPD Star Trek.
Yes, that's what it feels like. It's like this mix of genre shows sometimes, and it's like, even though it's fantasy.
Stardate 2021. He showed his ass again today.
Yes. Right. So yeah, that's just so weird to me. But yeah, so in the books there are White Walkers and then there are Whites, Wights. I think in the books they might even be called the Others, but they changed it to Whites in the show because of the Others' own loss. But either way, there are the White Walkers who are like the guy on the horse, and then the Whites are like the people who clearly died and were brought back. So that's the thing. When he did this to the baby, it's like, oh, is this how they make them? But then there's still questions as to who's taking care, like, it can't be very effective because that baby can't even crawl yet. Like, so who's taking care of that little White Walker baby is what I want to know.
I get the feeling that nobody has to take care of it anymore because it's like immortal or something.
Right? But that's the thing. I'm like, is it just laying there growing? Does it grow and age faster now? I don't know.
Oh, that would be so creepy if they like cut to like a wall of babies in tubes.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. My mind is blown. So
that would be awesome. I want that to happen now. Ice cubes just floating in the water. Babies.
So, okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll get back with some feedback, including the spoiler section at the end of the show. We'll be right back. Hey guys, did you know that you can support our website and our podcast just by shopping at Amazon? Go to projectfandom.com/Amazon and we will receive a small portion of your total order. It doesn't cost you anything extra. We get that little bit from Amazon's profits. Pretty cool, huh? Super easy, and it's a great way to support us, help us keep the podcast going, and help us do all the fun, crazy contests that we come up with. So if you like the podcast, you like the website, consider using our affiliate link for your shopping needs. Again, that's projectfandom.com/Amazon. Now back to the show. Okay, so we're back. So the book readers, man, minds blown last night. Minds blown. Because like I said, I was trying to point them out as we were talking about it so that you guys got how much this episode deviated. It wasn't just this. This is by far the hugest deviation, but like the stuff with the Crasters and Brienne going to Craster, like none of this, I love it. And I will tell you too, my personal thing too, I do think a lot of the Brienne stuff at this point, once they went beyond the wall, it was like skimming material. It was like, oh my God, something needs to happen. Where is he going? Where the fuck is this three-eyed crow? Like, it just goes on so long. So I am all for this shit. I am all for this. It totally makes me more interested in Bran as a character now and where he is. So love it.
And I want to say I do really like the fact that it does go from something like King's Landing, where it's more or less normal stuff, to this magical land beyond the wall with, White Walkers and stuff, because that does really help to define the world as being as large as it is. Like you were saying earlier, it is so massive that these things can happen in the same world, and it's they're not really affecting each other that much because they're so far away right now.
Okay, so the feedback. Devin, he also wrote me an email that I'm going to read in the spoiler section, but this non-spoilery feedback he left on Facebook. I feel I must start with Bronn. He continues to steal every scene he is in, whether he is physically bitch slapping someone or verbally doing so, as Jaime was on the receiving end of both. I loved when he was like, when Jaime goes, what the hell? This is me talking now. Sorry, Devin. When Jaime goes, what the hell was that? He goes, that was me knocking you on your ass with your own hand. Your own golden hand. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what that was. So Devin says, I also have to say the way Margaery mindfucked Tommen was great, but I would be willing to bet she ain't got shit on Lady Olenna and her power of the pussy. You have.
Oh,
I know. I was gonna say John just threw up in his mouth, probably.
yeah, a little bit.
I also wondered if you guys noticed how much Jojen seemed to be sweating during his scenes. Oh yeah, thank you. I meant to bring that up. He, besides the seizure, like, he was so pale and sweaty, and his lips looked kind of white, like earlier when we first saw them. And I'm trying to remember from the books. I know he's sickly. And I know he has those seizures, but I don't know. I don't remember if I know exactly what's wrong with him. Like, when I was rewatching the older episodes this weekend, I totally forgot. Do you remember Jaime's dyslexic? Did you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, there's a scene where Tywin says to Arya.
So many reading disabilities in this show.
Where Tywin said to Arya, he asked if she could read when she was his cupbearer at Harrenhal, and he said, that Jaime had trouble learning to read, and the Maester came to him and said, he's jumbling up the letters, like he's getting them all mixed up. And he goes, I wouldn't hear of it, so I sat with him 4 hours a day, and he hated me for it, but I taught him to read. And I thought, wow, people with dyslexia now would just be like, that wasn't helpful. Like, so I'm always curious, like when they talk about things like, clearly they don't have the same name in this time. I don't remember what is exactly wrong with Jojen, but I feel like there is something that there's an equivalent for it in real life. But clearly he has seizures. But yeah, he's looking rough.
Maybe it's epilepsy.
Yeah, something. But and then he goes, I had never noticed that before, but it was obvious it had to be for a reason, right? Yeah, I don't know, because I know he has powers too, like, or at least he talked about seeing Bran in his dreams, and that's how he knew to come and find him. So I don't know if that stuff is just taking a toll on him or what. And finally,
maybe he had a fever, and that's why he ended up having the seizure.
Yeah, because they are out there not really eating very much. It's cold. I don't know. But yeah, I did notice that. I don't know what to make of it though. And finally, the White Walkers. All I can say is business is about to pick up. Yeah, there's definitely a a feeling that, in a good way for me anyway, that that things are picking up, and I'm here for it. I love the changes. Charles says, okay, so how the hell did Locke get to the wall already when it takes everyone else weeks, months? Is there a train? And please let Hodor bash someone's head in soon. Um, so the first thing, yeah, Locke, I did not expect to see him there. It made me kind of want to go back and watch last week's episode when they were like raper, horse thief, eighth, ninth son, raper, horse thief. Like, I was wondering if he was
Horse raper.
horse raper. Ninth son thief. Yeah, I don't know if there's like if that, like, maybe we just didn't notice that he actually arrived last episode, but I was surprised to see him there that fast. And again, this is deviation from the books. Like, none of this happened, so I like the changes. But yeah, he did get there kind of quickly. And the thing with Hodor is, like, I feel bad for him, and I keep waiting to feel like, because Hodor is clearly, like they said, he's half giant, right? Like, he's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep waiting for Hodor to be like a protector and a badass, but he's not. Like, I don't know that that's going to happen because he doesn't seem to have a violent bone in his body, even if it's to protect Bran or himself. Like,
that maybe those two stories will cross over and he'll bash Locke in the head.
I hope so, but I don't, like, what is it going to take? Like, really, it kind of feels like he's just there because they need someone big enough to carry Bran's ass around. Like, but in terms of, like, being a protector, he doesn't seem to really be very useful. So there's more feedback in our podcast group. So Donnie says, I thought the episode was really good. It was as if Jaime was a whole different person in last episode, or the writing was bad, but he was back to his likable self this episode. That is clearly supports my theory that they didn't think that was rape. They wanted it to be maybe daring, you know what I'm saying? And weird, intense, and violent, because these two characters are weird, intense, and violent, but they fucked up, and I really think that the fact that it's not even mentioned this week, it just shows that they dropped the ball on that. And then he says, also, Brienne must have a list of people to kill by now with all the oaths. Yeah, she Stannis.
That's why she's got that Oathkeeper now.
Yeah.
She can keep those oaths now.
Yep. Stannis is on her shit list for what he did to Renly. Now we got oh man, Locke? Oh my God! Can you imagine if she runs into Locke? Like, that would be great. Like, that's the thing. There's so many people that have it coming from so many different people. Like, I just don't know who's gonna get the honor of, like, you know what I mean?
Maybe they'll take turns.
Yeah. Mrs. Week says, I agree with Donnie. Jaime didn't seem like the loser from last week. I wonder what gives. I wonder how much time has passed since the rape took place. Neither of them seem to even acknowledge it happening. Maybe he won't because he doesn't see it as rape. Who knows? Also, I sent feedback via email. I have to remember to put my name on those emails. I did see that email. I'll be reading it in a second. Shalita says, I really enjoyed last night's episode, specifically Lady Olenna. She is awesome. Love, love, love her. And not just because of her role in Joffrey's demise. She's the grandma you wish you had, sort of. Then again, if my Nana had ever shared her sex life with me, I would not be here today because I would have died of embarrassment as soon as she was done. So she really does remind me of my grandmother. She does. My grandmother reminds me of a cross of Lady Olenna and Betty White. And my grandmother tells
they're two very frank people about sexuality.
Yeah, they're just, I love my grandmother. But I'm just going to tell a story. My grandmother is like in her 80s. She's never going to hear this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So there's this story that goes, my grandfather, when my grandmother and grandfather were dating, like, he was pretty abusive. Like, he was not a nice guy. And they had that kind of on again, off again thing, and where he would, like, disappear for a while and then come back and, like, think that, he owned her. And one time he'd been away and she started dating this Puerto Rican guy. We lived in Brooklyn. That's where I grew up. And she started dating this Puerto Rican guy, and my grandmother was a fox. She had cheekbones like you would not believe. She was like, in her high school, like, she was Miss whatever her high school was. She was like Miss Durham County a few times. Like, she rode in floats and parades. Like, she was a fox. And So she goes out, she gets dolled up to go out on this date with this guy. And my mother tells the story. And my grandmother had this beautiful blue dress on, her hair was done up, and my grandfather showed up. And he was like, "You're not going anywhere." And he like ripped the dress off of her and pushed her down. And my mother said her and her sister were freaking out. They were crying. They were like, "Oh my God," because she was laying there like unconscious. And my grandmother opened her eyes, winked at them, and picked up this glass ashtray and jumped up and like knocked my grandfather out with it. Like, and I know that's like an awful, violent, horrible story, but at the same
No,
time, it's like my grandmother was a
yeah.
badass.
Yeah, I mean, it's violent. I mean, I mean, that happens, and it's nice when the defense is there too.
Yeah, right. Like, but just my aunt and my mother on their knees as little girls crying, like, "Mommy, mommy, wake up!" And her opening her eyes, telling them shh, and kind of winking at them, like, "I got this." So that's why. So if you guys wonder why I think my grandmother reminds me of Lady Olenna, it's stuff like that. Because I would imagine if a man put his hands on Lady Olenna, that she would pretty much react the same way. So, okay, Shalita goes on to say, "I totally agree with you guys on Jaime. It's like the showrunners wanted to go one way with his character, and whoever wrote last night's episode had to bring it back to normal." Shaking my head. Then again, still a truckload of sexual assault in this one, too. Poor Craster's daughters. But how freaky was that chant when someone gave birth to a baby boy child? Like there's a routine or something. Yeah, I think that those women are pretty much like at survival mode now. You know what I mean? And they know to keep the White Walkers from coming in here and, taking us, we just got to give these baby boys up.
Yeah, and that's basically what they've been. It's been taught to them that that's what happens. That's what you do when you have a boy.
Yeah,
you give it up.
She says, as long as Jaime isn't around Cersei, he's working on his redemption. Around her, it all goes to shit. Love the scenes with anyone who is not her. Whether he's being bitch slapped by Bronn, gifting Brienne with some nice stuff, or having heart-to-hearts with Tyrion, you see a likable guy, sort of. Because then you end up adding his rape of Cersei to the list of other bad things he's done. Granted, a couple of my coworkers still don't think it's rape. Looks like the show isn't intending to treat it as such, unless that's why Cersei was even colder to Jaime when they spoke. So, I think the way she treated him is how she has been treating him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it was her being like, "Oh, now you raped me, I'm going to treat you like an asshole." Like, she seemed to have been that way since he's been back.
Yeah, I honestly think the show is not treating it that way. So we have to, it's hard, but as viewers, we have to just not look at it that way. Even though that's what it was, because they messed up, we have to look at it as not being that. Because
and I mean, that's
otherwise, it's just going to be incongruous with how we see the character and how they're writing it.
And I mean, I feel like that's just how art is anyway. Like, I wrote something in the first book of my Sharing Space series where I had said one of the characters is being accused of not being black enough, like, and by possibly like living with a white guy, that was another thing to prove like she was like not in touch with her blackness. And one of the things that a character brings up to her, it was that she got judged on the fact that she processed her hair. And she said to her, "You need to stop letting people like define what being black is for you. Having a nappy head don't make you black." And I wrote that line 14 years ago when I first started writing this book. And since then, there's almost like this huge movement with a lot of black women taking pride in not processing their hair anymore. And some of them kind of lovingly refer to it as having nappy hair. There are like actually websites with the word nappy in it, and they're not saying it as a bad thing. And I actually had and I didn't mean it as a bad thing, but somebody reviewed the book on Amazon and she liked it, but she pointed that out and she thought it was insensitive. Or it was a Goodreads review or something. And I think that's like an example of when you write something, you can have intentions, but your execution, some people may not see it that way. Do you know what I mean? And so it may be hard for the reader to like continue reading the series and think, "Oh yeah, this is what like that." You know what I mean? Like, I didn't mean for the character to be insensitive, but I can't control where like the reader now looks at this character using that word in a derogatory way. They've already made up their mind on the character, do you know? And so I can see where people would have a problem like now not looking at him as a rapist, but I do think the intention has to mean something, right? So if the
Yeah.
showrunners are saying, yeah, we fucked up and we can see why you see it that way, but please don't go around thinking he's a rapist because that's
Yeah.
not, you kind of have to
Because
make a choice. Yeah.
yeah, because that's going to mess up how you're going to see the character in the future.
Exactly. And it's,
And
yeah,
the way that they're going to write it is that he's not a rapist.
right.
So you have to see him as not being a rapist because then that's how the character is going to be.
Right.
So when
And
he does something in the future,
exactly.
he does something, and it's like you're going to see it as not as good as it is, or not as bad as it is.
Right, right.
You're going to see it differently.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna just kind of change how you see everything, and you may miss some things, and it's just yeah. So you gotta have to make a choice to like kind of I don't want to say let it go in a flippant way, but um. Things, so Shalita continues, things are a mess in the north. I don't know how they expect the Night's Watch to hold any kind of line. The infighting among themselves is tearing them apart. And I really hope John and them get there before those dudes rape Mira. As soon as she saw what was happening, she was like, we got to go right now. She was not trying to get her ass raped. Yes!
The wording there,
Yeah.
the phrasing.
Yeah,
she's not trying to. Yeah,
she wasn't trying to get any parts of her raped.
Yeah,
but I love that the fact that she looked at the way they were treating those women, and she was like, "Listen, they may have been brothers of the Night's Watch, but they are clearly not anymore."
Okay, I'm gonna get your dog so we can get the fuck out of here.
Yes. But will Bran revealing himself as a Stark hurt or help them? And what about Locke? Right now, John thinks he's a brother, but if he moves towards Bran, I'm sure he'll cut him down. Yeah, this is the way George R. R. Martin does stuff. Even though some of this is, not what happens in the books, I do feel like the whole your heroes are never safe. And I don't give a fuck about you being happy still stands. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up for what's going to happen when John shows up. I would really love to think he's going to show up and save the day and nobody else is going to get raped or stabbed. But I don't know because I don't know. No one's safe.
I definitely don't think that the girl is going to be assaulted in any way because I don't think they would do that.
I hope not.
I mean, if it does, like, I don't know. I don't even want to talk about it
because I mean, seriously, listen, we can't be talking about rape every week. Game of Thrones, come on,
exactly.
I mean, I know the world is horrible, but give us a break, please.
I want to go back to wholesome incest that was consensual,
and I want to go back to children like Arya murdering grown men, like that. I'm all for that.
Yes. Yes.
Sansa, she says Sansa is in serious trouble. Littlefinger is looking at her like he's about to chow down. I said last night on Twitter, he's going to give her a necklace made of roofies because seriously, this guy is creepy. Speaking of rape, I get all kinds of nasty vibes from him. Her aunt, Shalita continues, her aunt is a crazy chick, and I'm sure Cersei is going to send some folks after her. I hope Brienne and Pod can help her. More importantly, I'm dying for Brienne and the Hound to meet up on the road, because that would be fabulous. I don't know. I don't want anything bad to happen to the Hound. I don't care how many farmers he grips up and steals silver from. I really just want him to make it out of this show in one piece, because I like him.
I want Brienne and Podrick to meet up with the Hound and Arya, and I want them to join forces.
Yeah, I don't want any fighting. Yeah. Like maybe in the beginning, but I want them all to come get on the same page and head to the Vale together. That would be awesome. Then finally she says, I hope this makes it in time for the podcast. Sister Speak is about to start cutting us off too because of so many long ass emails. So thanks for letting me post a long ass message. Yeah, listen, we don't get nearly as much feedback as Sister Speak does. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing a fucking 5-hour podcast. I'm going to fuck what we're talking about. So thank you, Shalita. We welcome long ass emails because like I said, we don't get nearly as much feedback as they do. And yeah, you don't have to worry about 5. John, can you imagine? Jesus, this is almost approaching 2 hours.
No,
and I'm like,
no, I cannot because I would leave.
John would be like, bitch, I got things to do. And so finally, let me read the email from Mrs. Weeks with her feedback on this episode. She says, good morning, Project Fandom. Judging from a few tweets last night, I have to say the show is saying the hell with canon. Yes, I have to say I love it. I'm a huge fan of showrunners giving diehard readers a big middle finger, then doing whatever the hell they want. It makes things more interesting and gives everyone something new to wonder about. Exactly. I really like last night's episode. And I can't wait to see where everything goes. One, the Adventures of Pod and Brienne should be worth the price of admission. That needs to be a spinoff.
Yeah.
And then she
But
goes,
didn't George R. R. Martin write like spin-off books that were kind of that not with the same characters but with different
yeah, there's
characters?
like a Dunk and Egg series that actually Natasha Kingston from Unspoiled sent to me that I need to read. But I think that those are, I think that that is like pre this, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Targaryen stuff, like stuff that happened before the show begins. Um, and I think that there's one other thing he did, but that's it. But yeah, but I don't think it's anything that's like still set in this time. Does that make sense? It's like
Yeah.
all stuff
I
that
mean,
happened before the show.
I was under the impression that it was more lighthearted like that, but I guess not.
Oh yeah, no, no. I
Yeah.
don't think he knows how to do lighthearted. She continues, I'm sickened by the fact that Cersei was raped and it's business as usual. Her bearing in the scene with Jaime makes me wonder if the director or writers last week's episode thought that what they did correctly reflected what happened in the book. I think that's what I think we've all agreed that yeah. Maybe it all looks the same to them. Did the scene between Marjorie and Tommen make anyone else uncomfortable? I mean, he's a little kid and she's like, what, 30? Funny how I didn't think about it too much when it was Joffrey, but he seemed older than he is in the book. Yeah, in the books, Tommen is so young that, like, I really think she sits down and plays toys with him. Like, that's how young he is. So, oh, excuse me, phone call. um, yeah, so they aged him up. It's still creepy and uncomfortable, but not nearly as bad as it could be. And I do think
Yeah.
that a lot of her seduction to me was less about sex and more about seduction of the mind. I mean, don't get me wrong, she is definitely playing on the fact that she's an attractive woman and he's a young boy with hormones. But I really think the connection is going to lie more in the fact that she's being a really good friend to him. And she's
Yeah.
probably
She's
going to be
yeah.
all for all the shit that Cersei is against, which we all know at that age is like the best way to be somebody's best friend is to like be like, yeah, your mom doesn't get it, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I think the thing to remember, like, or at least to take from that, is that she's not interested in him sexually. Like that, I don't think there's any sexual feeling
Yeah,
between her and him, like from her point.
right,
And I think that's what you have to when you look at that scene. It makes it less creepy when you look at it that way.
right, right. She goes, so are we believing Olenna or do we think she just said that to look good? Earlier this week, someone dropped a spoiler about Joffrey's death right on my desk and then walked out. That jerk. Well, now that it has happened, I can tell you that that is the case. Olenna plotted with Littlefinger to murder Joffrey, and they snuck in the poison. In the book, like I said, it was a hairnet. On the show, it's the necklace. And the show didn't blatantly say it, but what you were supposed to get from her fingering the little necklace on Marjorie's, neck, and from what he said about the necklace in the prior scene, that it was the two of them. So yeah, that's it. Case closed. And seriously, what the fuck up was? Wait, what the fuck is up with Littlefinger? He's so icky, and his accent sets my teeth on edge. Not because it's different from everyone else's, but because it sounds different in every scene. Maybe it's not the accent, but the delivery. Whatever it is, blech. Listen, I'm so bad with accents, so I don't notice when they're different. Like honestly, all accents to me are British. Like that's it. Like that's it. When I watch shows, I'm like, oh yeah, this is that, and they're from this part of the world. No, they're just all British.
And then Hitler's terrible British accent.
Yes. And then she says, last thing, I know it's cold at the wall, but doesn't sparring work up a sweat? How is Jon Snow still in his clothes? I just have a feeling you want to see him get naked. And that Lot guy, watch your back, John. I'm waiting for the podcast with bated breath. Thank you, lady. Yeah. I think she just wants to see John get naked. You might have to go back and watch some season 3 scenes with him and Ygritte in the little hot springs bathtub there.
And you mean Jon Snow, not me, because...
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't know. Maybe she wants to see you get naked. Who knows?
Well, stay tuned for the next podcast.
Listen, I will pimp you out for listeners. I have no problem doing that. Just call me Littlefinger. So that's it. There is some spoiler feedback that I'm going to read, my thoughts on some stuff. There is something that someone posted on Gawker where and this is why I said I'm just going to ask you, and you can decide if you think I should read it now or if I should do it in the spoiler section. But basically, the thing that had the baby at the end they actually gave it a name. Not like a proper name, like his name is George Smith, but like a name, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the Goblin King or something like that, just to give you an idea of like the type of name I'm talking about. So they credited that as a name, and apparently
they said it is a character from the book. Is that what you're saying?
no,
Or no?
no,
Okay.
no. That's what I'm saying. It's not like they gave it a name like a folklore-y type name. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Okay, so
Yeah, but I thought you meant like it was a name that was in the book, and they said that was the character.
oh
But
yeah, no.
Okay.
But so in the show, that name was mentioned when old Nan was telling Bran a story. And then in the universe of, and this is like, I don't know, this is in the Song of Ice and Fire wiki. The legend behind that name is mentioned. So it's 2 paragraphs of what the origin of this thing. So I was going to read it, but I don't know if people would think that it's spoilers. Personally, I don't think it's spoilers because the thing was mentioned in the first season. But here's the thing. The show then did go take it off.
Well, because it's not something that's from the book, so I mean, it can't really be a spoiler.
That's how I feel. So,
I mean, it's basically just speculation
it's
from
speculation.
someone else.
It's speculation. Do you want me to read it?
I don't care.
Okay. All right, you guys. So I'm going to read it, and then we'll do we'll close up the show and do the spoiler section. So apparently, in the Game of Thrones, HBO Go's information, the person at the end that has the baby, they called him the Night's King, like the Night's Watch, but the Night's King. And then according to the A Song of Ice and Fire wiki, according to legend, the Night's King lived during the Age of Heroes, not long after the wall was complete. He was a fearless warrior who was named the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. To give you guys reference, I really feel like Jorah, not Jorah, Mormont, the Lord Commander Mormont, I think he was like the 997th or 8th Lord Commander. So that's how long ago it was. He was named the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Later, he fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. He chased her and loved her, though her skin was cold as ice. And when he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. He brought her back to the Night Fort, which I think is one of the keeps along the wall, like how they have Castle Black and Eastwatch by the Sea. He brought her back to the Night Fort, and I think that might be where Bran and Hodor and them were when they met with Sam last season. And after the unholy union, he declared himself king and her his queen and ruled the Night Fort as his own castle for 13 years. During the dark years of his reign, horrific atrocities were committed, of which tales are still told in the North. It was not until his own brother, the king in the North, and Joramun, the king beyond the wall, joined forces that the Night's King was brought down and the Night's Watch freed. After his fall, when it was discovered that he had been sacrificing to the others, which would be the Whites, possibly in the same way Craster has been sacrificing babies to them, all records of him were destroyed and his very name was forbidden. It is likely this led to the lords of the North to forbid the Night's Watch to construct walls at their keeps, ensuring the keeps would always be accessible from the south. In the books, old Nan told Bran the story of the Night's King, and despite rumors to the contrary, says that he was a Stark, a brother to the King of Winterfell, and that his name was Bran as well. So, that is, something that's out there. That they had called him the Night's King, and that's, yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's very spoilery at all, because I don't know what the fuck was just said.
So, okay.
I mean, I basically get it, but
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
basically
honestly,
get right.
it's not
Yeah,
something. It's like out of context, so it's not something that
right,
I
right.
think is spoilery at all because you don't really know. It's like some guy was a king, and then
And then he was not a
he
king.
he was taken over by his brother. I don't
Yeah,
know.
who was king in the north. So that would probably been a Stark.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the only part that I was like, oh well, I bet that was a Stark.
yeah, and then there was a king beyond the wall who sounds like he was like, like a Mance Raider type, like somebody who, was beyond the wall living as free folk and declared himself king, and his name was Joramun. And in the books, there is this, which they haven't brought up, so I just don't think they're ever going to do it. But there is like this legend of this horn of Joramun, which if legend says if you blow the horn, the wall will come down. So there's like this whole thing in the books about is that horn still out there and like, does it exist and all this stuff. So that's clearly where that name came from. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all we got. I'm going to come back with the spoiler section after the music. Before I do, I want to thank everybody for listening. I know this was a long one, but it was a lot of good stuff. Hopefully, you're still enjoying our podcast. If you are, please consider going to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review, which we will read on the air. We haven't had any new reviews in a couple of weeks. That makes me really sad. New reviews help us get found by other listeners on iTunes, so please consider taking 2 minutes to do so. We'd really appreciate it. For this or any of the other shows we cover on Podcast Fandom, which are the following. We'll actually be recording our very last podcast for this season of the following tomorrow night, because the season finale is tonight. We also cover Resurrection. I'll be doing that in the next day or so. That's going to be over in 2 weeks. And we are still trying to figure out which shows we're going to cover this summer when all these shows are over. Right now, I am pretty positive I'm going to be covering, or we're going to be covering The Strain. And there is a new show on HBO. I don't know if you guys saw it. They showed a trailer for it before Game of Thrones last night. That's going to be starting this June, I believe, called The Leftovers.
Yes, from Damon Lindelof.
Yeah, and it just looks really good. Basically, the premise is about 200 million people
Two
disappeared.
2% of the population.
2% of the world's population just vanished at the same time, out and just gone. And it's like the aftermath of that, like what it means and how it affects people. And it just looks really creepy and really good and super dramatic. And I'm actually going to do a post about the trailer on our website, hopefully later today or tomorrow, so that you guys, if you're interested, you can get an idea of, what the show's about. And I definitely want to podcast that. So, John, I don't know if you're down to cover it with me. But
Yep.
thank you. I think it'd be a lot more fun if it's just me than if it's just me talking about it. So The Strain and The Leftovers are two shows we're definitely going to be covering this summer. But we're still open to suggestions for one or two more. So if you have any, send it to projectfandom@gmail.com. Other than that, you can find us on Twitter at Project Fandom. If you want to tweet us about Game of Thrones, we live tweet it every Sunday night. Use the hashtag PFGOT. We'll see it. We'll read it on the air. There was no tweet of the week because everybody that participated last night are people that have already won the past 3 weeks. So yeah. If I come across one though, I'll throw another name in there. But for now, there wasn't one for this week. But if you get tweet of the week, we put your name into a drawing for a free Game of Thrones T-shirt from our Zazzle store. So hanging out with us on Twitter has some advantages. Again, use the hashtag PFGOT to participate. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Project Fandom. Please give us a like. It's a great way to keep up with the content we put out from our website, as well as any contests and giveaways we have going on. And as always, you can find us on our website at projectfandom.com. We cover television, movies, books, comics, anime, gaming, both tabletop and video games, and more. So check us out at projectfandom.com. So that's it. Stay tuned for the spoiler section if you're so inclined after the music. But everyone else, we'll see you next week. We'll be back to discuss Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 5. See you next week. Hey guys, welcome to the spoiler section. It's just me because I am already spoiled. Read the books, Got a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to do it quickly and not have you here too late because it's already been a long podcast. So I'm going to read the email that Devin sent, and then I'm just going to talk about some general stuff, my thoughts on some of the things that happened differently in this episode, and how I felt about it. So Devin writes, my question this week is fairly simple. How do you feel about the show surpassing the books or taking liberties from the books? I, for one, found it exciting and fascinating to once again be just another viewer and not know what to say when my non-book reader friends ask me what the fuck was that at the end of the episode. I feel as though book readers sometimes get so caught up in changes they forget to enjoy the show for what it is. I am interested in hearing your thoughts on how far you think the show will go from the books, and do you welcome it as I do? Thanks for what you do, and I really look forward to listening to your podcast every week. Thank you, Devin. Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, I like the books, don't get me wrong. And I have long said that I I almost feel bad sometimes for John and Megan because I feel like they can't possibly understand how awesome this story is and how intricate it is because they haven't read the books. Like, there's one thing, like somebody wrote me, my friend Mary, who edits my books, by the way, she's my editor, my friend. A few months ago, she wrote me something about Azor Ahai, and I was like, who the fuck is that? And I was like, oh yeah, because in the books, it's such a big deal. They haven't mentioned it once in the show. There are people who are watching the show who don't even suspect that Jon Snow is not really Robert's kid. I mean, excuse me, Ned's kid. Like, they honestly don't think that that's even an issue. Like, they just believe everything the show is telling them. And so, I don't know. I almost feel sorry sometimes that the people who haven't read the books are missing out on stuff, you know, on how deep the story is. That said, some shit just goes on way too fucking long in those books. I'm sorry. There, I said it. Dany is at Marine way too motherfucking long. The shit with Bran is fucking boring as fuck. It just is. I don't care about the majority of the things that happened to Bran until he finally got to that fucking tree. And it's so confusing. And so, listen, I knew they were not going to be able to tell this part of the books, these books, on the show in the same way. I just knew they weren't. And that's why I started the book readers group on Facebook, because I wanted to be able to say, there's no way this can be a satisfying ending if they continue it the way it is. Because, you know, what a lot of people who haven't read the books don't understand is that there are characters that, for all we know, will never see each other again. And that's why when you rewatch the first 2 episodes, it's so sad, because the second episode, The King's Road, Jon is going one way to go to the wall down the King's Road, and Ned is going with Robert's group to back to King's Landing, and he says, I promise the next time we see each other, we'll talk about your mother. That's never going to happen, and that's fucking sad. The last time Catelyn saw her daughters were at King's Land, was at Winterfell. When she went to King's Landing to meet with Ned, she never got to see her daughters. Bran and Rickon haven't seen anybody in forever, you know? So I think people who haven't read the books are watching the shows and they're waiting for like these great things to happen and these reunions, and they're waiting for Dany, and it's like, yeah, so the fuck are we? We're still waiting for Dany to get her ass to King's Landing, to Westeros. And I worry that it would not be as satisfying, because part of wanting Dany to come there and fuck shit up is you want to see people like Tywin, like Cersei, like Joffrey get what's coming to them. You want the Mountain to pay for what he did, and to her brother and his, you know, to her brother's wife. But that's never going to happen because they keep killing every fucking body. By the time Dany gets there, it's like the majority of the main cast that we met in the first 2 books, they're not going to be there. So it's like, I don't know. I'm really worried about how satisfying the ending is going to be. But with these changes, I feel like they're amping stuff up. It's going to go faster. I love it. And I honestly don't care if the show surpasses the books. I don't. I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of book readers, especially the purists, who are going to have a problem with that. But fuck it. I read books for one thing and I watch TV for something totally different. And they're giving me good TV right now. And I don't know that it would be as good if they followed the book completely. So let's talk about some of those changes. Bran going to Craster's. What the fuck? And I tried not to be spoilery when I was talking to John, but I do not have my hopes up that there is going to be a Jon Snow Bran reunion next week. I just don't. I don't. Depending on how important it is to George R. R. Martin's story that these characters don't see each other again until the end. You know, I don't know, but it feels like it is. It feels like he's keeping them apart so that they can have their journeys and have it be independent of their relationships with their family and friends. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's part of it. Like, Arya's off becoming this completely different woman that she would have become if she, let's say, was on the run with Sansa. Do you know? So I don't know if they feel like Jon being with Bran before Bran continues on to the rest of the journey we know from the books, kind of takes away from that, then it won't happen. And so I just really don't want to get my hopes up. And I'm not going to be surprised if it turns out that, you know, Jon gets there after Bran has escaped, you know, and maybe he won't even know that his brother was there. Let's see, what were some of the other changes? There was, oh god, now I'm drawing a blank. Let me look at my notes again. So that was different. Oh, the stuff with Marine. Yeah, seriously. Some of the stuff in the book with Marine, it just took way too fucking long. It just did. And I didn't give a shit. And I didn't give a fuck about Strong Belwas. I didn't. I'm sorry, you guys. I didn't. And a lot of the shit that happens here I think I want to see how she handles governing in Marine. I'm interested in the stuff with the dragons, like killing the little boy and how she's going to deal with that, like being responsible for these creatures that cannot be domesticated out there, just doing what creatures do. That's interesting. The whole, you know, when what's his name gets there, the Martell kid or the other Targaryen, like, yeah, that stuff I'm interested in, but they're not going to get to that for a while. And I'm just so concerned that people who haven't read the books are going to be like, when the fuck is she getting to Westeros? And they're going to kind of give up on it. So I'm all for amping up the pace and making it fresh, because I didn't want to be one of those people. Because if I felt it reading the books, I know I'm going to feel it in the show. Like, she just needs to hurry and get her fucking dragons to Westeros already. So all of that was different with how they took Marine. I'm totally fine with it going faster than it did in the books. And then finally the stuff with the White Walkers at the end. I'm looking through my notes. Those are only the main changes that I want to talk about. The fact that Sam told Jon about Bran, what the fuck? But it makes sense. Like, it had to happen for it to unfold this way, like for them to like fucking tease us with this reunion we may or may not get next Sunday. But the White Walkers at the end. So yeah, listen, I loved it. I don't care if it spoiled me for the books. I don't give a shit. It was great and it needed to happen. I don't know what it means. Like, is he the Night's King? Do I fucking care? Like, I guess, but did it look cool? Fuck yeah, it did. Are there a bunch of White Walkers babies just crawling around till they can walk? I don't know. I want to see more, and I'm just scared that they give us a taste and then we won't see another White Walker scene for like 3 or 4 more episodes. And finally, talking about the changes with the White Walkers and stuff. Oh wait, I just had a brain fart and I lost my thought. Hold on. The babies, the White Walkers, what it means. Oh, the not the White Walkers. The one thing that they haven't done, which if I'm not mistaken, no, it happens at the end of book 3, and they're not done with book 3 stuff, so maybe they'll still do it. The Lady Stoneheart shit. Oh my god. there are people out there that are like, oh, I want to see Cold Hands. I don't give a fuck about Cold Hands. I mean, yeah, it'd be cool, it'd be great, whatever. Unless Cold Hands turns out to be Benjamin Stark, I don't give a fuck about who he is or anything. I'm sorry, I just don't. What I do give a fuck about is Lady Stoneheart. Um, when are we going to see that? I am crossing my fingers that that is how the end of this season plays out. So I am hoping over these next 5 episodes, Brienne is out there investigating with Pod. I hope that we hear about some phrase who went missing. Like I just please, fingers crossed. I want to see Lady Stoneheart in the finale, preferably in episode 9, but definitely by the finale. So if that goes into season 5, I'm gonna be real shitty. Or if we get to season 5 without seeing that, or if they don't put that in, I'm gonna be super, super, super fucking shitty. So that's it. All right, that's it. That's the end of the spoiler section. I hope I covered everything. But to answer your question, shorter than I just did. Devin, love the changes. I'm here for it. I hope they keep it up. Okay, that's it. This is a super ass long ass podcast. I will see you guys next week.